Stephen King adaptations have been on a bit of a bumpy road lately. I don't necessarily take pride in saying that as somebody who is a fan of the guy from a visionary and horror perspective. The guy can write a good story, though I've never personally read one of his books in full. I started it and I haven't finished it yet. I need to. But the guy has a particular fascination in his insight with the human experience, whether it be on an emotional or a suspense level. His psychological insight really impresses me. I mean, for example, Gerald's Game. Like I was saying, it's a bit of a bumpy road lately, but I can think of many projects that have inspired me in regards to horror cinema that I've watched perhaps repeatedly. The Shining, Gerald's Game, I think, is one of the more underappreciated adaptations. It's so good if you've never watched it. The It movies, films like that draw in a crowd. But then you perhaps have some clunkers as well, or ones that maybe don't necessarily perform as perfectly. Sleepwalkers, for example, Pet Sematary. I liked the newer one, but it was nowhere near like the suspense of the original I think it's an 84 movie. And then Firestarter, very recently. And I'm a big Zac Efron fan, and I looked at the trailer, I thought it looked good, but the movie, how many films are we going to have these days? Like, how were they thinking that one wouldn't come across as conventional? We've had, let's see, X-Men, The Darkest Minds, other films centered on not only gifted kids, but pyromaniac-type powers. Like, it felt typical. So, again, like I was saying, bumpy record lately, from where we sort of used to be a couple years ago with the Stephen King high. And you could probably mention other titles as well. But I hope for a good experience, and I hope the Children of the Corn movie is that, though it's like Firestarter, and that this is another remake of a long line of remakes and sequel pictures. We'll see how this fares. I don't necessarily know the quality of the studio that's behind this to the best extent. RLJE Films is credit here, and this will also be a Shudder release, so it is going to be pretty accessible, especially on horror streaming. That could be a good debut. I'm just not sure what to think of it yet. Now, I will keep this video fresh for anybody who perhaps has not read the story and you want to go in with as much ambiguity as possible. I have read the general synopsis. I haven't read the story in full yet. So I have a general idea for what's going to be transpiring here. I'm sure the trailer will better allow me, because that was a couple days ago and I read the synopsis, it'll remind me in part of things perhaps I've forgotten. I'm genuinely curious to see how far the story goes, though. We're going to look at the Red Band trailer, and that perhaps expresses a bit more of a liberty in its depiction than maybe other trailers would, especially on Green Band ones. And for a story centered around kids, though I've seen pictures I find quite good on that note. Sometimes unnerving, like for example, the example I made of Pet Sematary. The 84 one, oh yeah, that is extremely unnerving. The second one was a little easier in terms, actually I thought wasn't there more of a concentration there with the daughter than in 1984 with the son? I think again it was 1984, I might have that wrong. That one reined it in at least a little bit, even though still both films were disturbing. And in the realm of children and horror movies, even beyond Stephen King, I recently, the Orphan movies, like the sequel, I've seen that one twice. I love the Orphan films, both of them, and the newer one is actually really good. If you've never seen it and you're like, oh, it's just a remake, no, it's actually pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's fun. It's a great experience. But I've liked films along those lines. But even then, for the most part, the savagery is reined in. I'm curious to see how far this film goes in its depiction of kids performing horrific acts. Because there perhaps is an argument to be made about, well, we're making a horror movie here centered around kids and asking them to simulate savage behavior that certainly no person should ever manifest in their lives. Especially if it's something done to others or oneself. So I'm really curious to see how this comes off. But it is a Stephen King adaptation. And though I've never seen any of the Children of the Corn movies that have aired previously to this one, maybe I will, I don't know. I'm open on the Stephen King note. Let's hope, though, for the sake of this movie, it's getting a better debut than Firestarter. I wish that film were actually quite good. Because, again, the trailer, took me back. It looked like a fun experience. I'm like, oh, you're a bit of a conventional letdown. Let's see what Children of the Corn, though, looks like. And this will also be another opportunity for me to engage with RLJE Films. Again, I haven't looked at much of their stuff. I think I have in the past on occasion. So I'm not exactly sure what to expect on competency of delivery, but let's take a look at it and see for ourselves.
Prepare.
To be fair, Stephen King can do a good job, by the way, in the realm of children centered in horrific events.
Based on the short story by Stephen King.
Good depiction so far. It feels a lot like In the Tall Grass.
Like you've never seen it before.
With a more westernized color palette.
I know, it sucks. So hard sometimes you can hardly breathe. But I can help with your pain. Brace yourself. He who walks, he talked to me. He took care of me. So now I'm going to take care of him.
Like killing all the adults?
For starters.
Clever camera angles. Again, I'm curious to see how much we're asking of the kids here, especially what to perform on screen.
Come! This is our world now!
And I get this is necessary to the story.
Children of the Corn.
I guess my concern comes up, like I was saying, this is going to be a savage story, especially if you've read into the general plot. My concern is how much we ask kids to simulate. There's some clever shots in there, the way that it's structured, and the trailer itself, even though it is red band, cuts itself strategically so that we're not watching any of the kids perform the savage act themselves. You can allude to certain things or perhaps show, heaven forbid, a bloodied corpse, where we can in our minds think, okay, the kid just did this, but we're not asking the kid on the set to perform said act. There's clever ways you can go about illustrating those scenes without having to cross a real gray area, I think. That does tend to lean more into, should we be this irresponsible? I don't know. True, it might be entertaining, right? It might be a fun for a ride of a thriller movie. I don't know. Again, lately, Stephen King projects perhaps have had a mixture of response. And maybe there's a couple projects, to be fair, I haven't looked at yet, Engage. I'm a little behind, as I've been saying for a while. But I'm curious to see the evolution of the movie, especially how far it goes perhaps on its final depiction. Not just on quality, but on the regard of how reined in and responsible is it. Even if, again, it's trying to be very true to what Stephen King wrote. And it seems to be alluding to that quite well. I like the overall quality. It does feel, in part, like a higher budget TV movie. I don't get a streaming feel as much. Neither, well, it doesn't feel like a stream project to me. It feels honestly like a bit of a level up. But some of the usual streaming fare that might be shall we say, not to the level of expectations of where we would normally consider said project. We'll see what the final result of Children of the Corn is. And again, like I said, this is coming off a long history of remakes. So maybe this could revive interest. Maybe this could be a better story. Then maybe some of the depictions past, if, again, I wouldn't know if they were responded to well or not. I have a suspicion, though, maybe upon later entries, it wasn't. I don't know. Sometimes remakes go down that territory. I'm curious to see the evolution of the project. I think the Shudder debut exclusivity will give it a pool of access that certainly fits the horror landscape. I think it'd be a project that people watch. I'm curious in a lot of ways to see it, not just to familiarize myself with a depiction of the Children of the Corn story, but to answer perhaps how far it goes in its depiction, right? Does it cross in that threshold of, well, it might be great on delivery and it might benefit the faithfulness of the story, but we're asking, Again, there's creative ways that filmmakers can strategize in how they film certain scenes without it feeling a bit exploitative of where we would ask children to go, especially in performances, right? Orphan and, well, the Orphan movies, quite frankly, and maybe some of the other Stephen King adaptations that I'm forgetting, or maybe the newer one. I forget again how far that one went, but from what I remember, it was a little more reined in the 84 version. The 84 one is just so disturbing with Pet Sematary. Unnerving, but still, oh man. I'm curious in a lot of ways to gauge Children of the Corn. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below, maybe for those of you as well who have seen previous adaptations of this in the cinema space. We'll see what happens. I mean, Stephen King movies are always attractive, at least on that note. But what can we expect in terms of quality delivery? That's a bit more ambiguous now. I hope for good. We'll see. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.